Welcome back to Sonic Mania. Yeah. This time, we are going to play as Tails. However, we're going to be playing with no emeralds this time. Really, just to make sure we know what that's like. First of all, we're going to have to delete one of these files though, I think. Let's see, this one is going. Alright. Let's play Sonic Mania! Alright, so Tails pretty much is very similar to Sonic 3 Tails. He can fly. He has a small part of his 2011 features, which is something people refer to as fast flying. He can do that in this game, although it's probably a little bit trickier. I can't say I've actually tested that myself as of yet. I think I'll do it right now. But what I mean by fast flying is that you work with multiple buttons so that you get the jump and the flight off very quickly. This is useful in some situations. And in general, that's really what it's all about. Anyway, pretty much the same rules as before, except I'm not getting the emeralds. I'm going to be playing the occasional Blue Sphere bonus stage. I'm probably going to see this same one again. Whoop-de-doo, what a surprise. That's probably why I shouldn't play too many of these, because I'm just going to be showing you the same ones over and over again. Because these playthroughs happen on different days. In fact, we'll actually just leave. You've already seen this one, I'm not going to waste your time. You might notice from checkpoint respawn, no matter what kind of time you actually had in terms of centiseconds, the centiseconds reset to 0. It's actually a pretty dumb feature, but it's a feature. Fortunately, this game has a time attack mode, so most people really wouldn't have to worry about that. And in terms of speedrunning, Mania is run by RTA anyway, not IGT. I almost died. Alright, so in this game, Tails can also hit bosses with his tails. His hitbox for hitting bosses is actually a lot bigger than you might realize. I hope to show this off later. It's actually kind of obnoxious, I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, Tails generally takes the same paths as Sonic. I'll try and explore a little bit more in some places Sonic normally wouldn't have been able to really get to easily. But I'm not going to make any promises, because I truly do not know all the layouts yet, so... You might have noticed how I hit that enemy, right? It seemed like more like Tails' head hit the enemy than his tails did. And yeah, it's kinda right. Tails apparently has as hard a head as Knuckles in this game for whatever reason. Which is actually kinda weird. But yeah, I'll explain a little bit about how the bonus stages work. Because I'm recording this on an entirely different day and just like going off a fresh restart of the game is going to keep defaulting to that very first stage as my first stage, if that makes any sense. It's the same way if I played the game for the first time and just, you know, played the very first bonus stage. Because that would just show up as the very first bonus stage anyway. So yeah, it's kind of one of the reasons why I really wish there were actual bonus stages that gave you rings and stuff like that, and possibly shields as well, that kind of stuff. But alas, Sonic Mania is what it is. And once again, the Phantom Ruby is a thing, making this entire game fake. Have you ever wondered where that drop was even coming from? I know I sure have. Imagine an entirely different Sonic 2 arc where we finally figure out where exactly that one particular drop that falls in Sonic Mania actually ever came from, and why it was apparently avoided in Sonic 2. That would be funny, wouldn't it? Whoops. I'm not going to deny that Tails is an okay character to play, and in some aspects is very, well, not very, but is easier than Sonic. But Sonic and Tails are just so similar, there's really not a lot to say. That Tails really has such an advantage over Sonic in that regard. The same things you experience as Sonic, you'll likely experience as Tails. It's just with his flight capabilities and his swimming capabilities, you'll just probably be able to take slightly easier paths here and there. So anyway, this is really the first time Tails has had significant action in a Sonic game in a very long while. Pretty much since episode 2 of Sonic 4. But even then, he was always a secondary character in Sonic 4 episode 2. He was just needed for a lot of tag team action. Like I said before, if you play Sonic and Tails, you can kinda still have that tag team action. If you so desire. And in some cases you might even need it. Really depends on what other reason you're playing this game, I guess. Tails' most useful game probably had to be Sonic Adventure, though. Sonic Adventure, you were able to really use Tails' flight as a real advantage. Granted, it resulted in 5 stages of him flying over a lot of the level. But in some aspects, that's probably what made it really nice. Because unlike the 2D aspect of Tails in 3D and flying like that, you could really get to see a lot of the stage, even parts of it you probably didn't even realize exist. And that was probably one of the most inviting things about Tails back then. And then we have Tails in CD11, for example, where Tails doesn't even have a story. Tails is just there. He's just there on Little Planet, just doing a thing. Probably wondering where Sonic is, because I'm sure Sonic would have been much more able to handle what was going on in the first place. And that, kids, is why Tails does not belong in CD11. Alright, so let's try this Puyo thing again. I like how your shield just disappears, though. It's kind of interesting. I wonder if it comes back at the end. This start looks a little bit weird already, without any doubt. This gives me an idea. Like I said, I don't claim to be a Puyo expert, so... It took a million years to get a yellow in the right spot, man. So there's that critical 4-chain I was talking about. 4-chain usually leads to death, but a 5-chain is much better at actually making that happen faster than a 4-chain was. Because not only did I have to take a while to get that 4-chain didn't insta-kill Eggman. So the difference between that and a 5-chain is pretty big, if you're trying to do that fast. Because the 5-chain would have probably killed him instantly, rather than just, 2 or 3 Puyos later, in this instance. Anyway, we're back at the action stage, Studiopolis. Not to be confused with Casinopolis. I kinda wanna go back up. So that's a reference to colors. Good, great. Awesome, outstanding, and amazing. Of course, honestly, that's more like a meme than anything, because it didn't really take any real skill to be able to do that in Sonic Colors. You just had to press the button 5 times. That's really all it took. Of course, I could also go on a different tangent about how Colors was the last great game to have a well-designed scoring system at this point. But I think I'll save you from that for now. This game only has a generally standard scoring system for 2D games, which isn't surprising. In some cases, it's actually weaker than other 2D games, but Sega in the last at least 5 years now have really not particularly cared about making sure a Sonic game had a good scoring system because, well, caring for such detail is not profitable in the long run, unfortunately. So it does result in such things being sacrificed for the option of having more games. But I can tell you one thing Sonic 4 did right is that they actually had a caring scoring system, at least for Episode 1. Episode 2 really took that and just destroyed it. it actually has one of the most awkward scoring systems in the entirety of Sonic. Because Episode 2, not only does your time bonus get literally based on your actual time, down to the centisecond, the rate at which the time bonus decreases over time is actually sort of random. It's not really random, but it just appears that way because it's inconsistent and most definitely not the same on a stage-by-stage basis. Compare that to Episode 1, and Episode 1 style basically allowed you to get the max time bonus in every stage if you were good enough. Which is actually sort of unprecedented in Sonic games. Because typically you only got the max time bonus in like one stage, maybe two, maybe three. Really depended which game you were talking about. For instance, if you were talking about Sonic 1, you probably would have gotten a 50,000 time bonus at least twice. Maybe just the once in Green Hill. And then from there, you probably wouldn't have gotten another one ever. Now take the aspect of earning a max time bonus and just put it into every stage possible. That would be Sonic 4 Episode 1. And in some aspects, that's why Episode 1 is actually pretty fun. Because you're given the opportunity to experience actually earning the top time bonus in a non-fringe situation. Basically, what I'm trying to say is you get to earn a time bonus in every stage instead of just like 2, or 3, or 1, or 5. Again, this depends on the game we're talking about, but I'd say that's a pretty big deal in my eyes. And that's why I also came to appreciate Sonic 4 Episode 1 a lot more than I might have at the very beginning. If some people have ever watched my Episode 1 playthrough, and, well, back then I was talking about my struggles with the final boss, because the final boss is usually a thing of contention for most people, because the final boss is actually fairly difficult, unless you know what you need to do. Oh yeah, you can also solve puzzles yourself. Pat, I like to solve the puzzle. Genesis does. We. You bet we're gonna play the lotto again as long as we find it. I already passed the first one, I think, but I won't be passing the second one. I already talked about the various issues with Mania's scoring system in my last playthrough, so there's not really a point of contention to talk about it again. But if you want to think about all types of all the Sonic games you ever played, and think about their scoring systems, actually, that would be an interesting couple hours you could spend yourself in trying to figure out which Sonic game really had the best scoring system and why. Now, I talk a lot about Color's actually having a good scoring system. Well, Color's scoring system does have spam in it, but it's actually one of the most controlled forms of spam in the entirety of Sonic. Because the way Colors was designed is that it also had specific time limits for each stage. There were 4 kinds of time limits in the stages, depending on their length. And so these time limits governed how long you could earn points. Wow. I don't know how that worked. That was random. Sure. Not too bad. That was 20 rings. Not too shabby. Yeah, that's why I should use the first lotto, not the second one, because it likes to throw you out. Like that. And with no way to return, it's kind of lame. I'll probably figure this out eventually when I ring attack this, because this is probably the most fun level to ring attack in the entire game, just for that reason. Anyway, this boss is really cheapened out, because Tails is just a boss. Tails is almost vertical with Eggman, and he can even hit Eggman when he's actually tired. If you just saw that briefly. He can hit Eggman when he's tired. Tails is OP, please nerf. Alright, time for Flying Butter. A flying stick of butter, the aircraft. An aircraft ride you would definitely melt for. Right, so going back to Color's scoring system, I mentioned there was a bunch of spam, and it was controlled spam. It's not the only way to earn score in that game. There was even an entire dynamic where even collecting rings itself gave points, but then bringing it to the end also gave an additional bonus. You even had a bonus if you lost a lot of rings. If you were that kind of person who liked collecting a lot of rings in a playthrough and then just like lost the ball right before the end, for example, that sort of bonus was for you. It really was. Because what it does is it gives you half of the ring bonus that you would have otherwise gotten if you took those rings to the end. It's more like a consolation prize, but it's still something that they actually thought of, and you know, I can appreciate things like that. The whole concept of Cube giving points based on those blue rings, that returned in Sonic Forces. Instead, you could literally turn enemies into rings as well. That was another fun thing about Forces. I'd say that's definitely an improvement to the old Cube, by far. But, you know, beside the fact that Forces is lacking in some aspects, that was one of their that was definitely one of the positive aspects of Forces. So this boss also gets to be cheapened out for the same reason, because Tails is a god. You'll want to watch out for the enemies, though, and staying too far above the thing. So, there are some definite counters to this. But generally, you'll be able to do it a lot faster than Sonic would. Unless Sonic also had a Thunder Shield coming into here, that would be the most OP out of all of it. But if we want to talk scoring systems, there are also particular types of scoring systems that remain for several games for the most part. Like, I'm gonna start with Adventure 2, and I would technically end with, like, Shadow the Hedgehog. Because they all had a similar type of scoring system. Except for Adventure 2, the common time bonus base was 50,000. Meant to be very similar to the original classic games, which also had a max time bonus of 50,000. Except for S3K in this game, which for some reason have 100,000 in the worst place possible. Which, you know, really does kind of piss me off. But that's, you know, another story. So you might remember these things from Wacky Workbench. First of all, you can actually destroy them and they can hurt you. Unlike in Wacky Workbench. But who really cares about Wacky Workbench? Wacky Workbench is one of the worst CD levels. Although it would have been a nice troll if Wacky Workbench actually showed up as a level in Sonic Mania instead of Stardust Speedway and Metallic Madness. It would have been a nice troll. I mean, you even had an element of Quartz Quadrant in this game in Lava Reef. Sadly, there was no pinball aspect, like Collision Chaos. And although maybe 90% of people you talk to probably hated Collision Chaos 3, I absolutely love it. It is one of the best levels of Sonic CD, and nobody can say otherwise. But anyway, the last game with a true scoring system before Mania, other than Episode 2, which was slightly after Generations, Generations scoring system was really interesting, but also very lacking, because the only two sources of your score were your time and your rings, up to 100. Anything after 100 rings actually didn't even give you more score in Generations. For some bizarre reason. I don't know why they really didn't decide to think of it in Generations, but it definitely resulted in a shortcoming. Because in a lot of stages, even with all the glitches... What the fork, Eggman? Alright. Eggman's just like, nah, I don't want to get hit today. Look at this guy. This boss can be frustrating because Eggman can just really kind of decide to not get hit, depending on how soon you're trying to hit him. Like, that hit right there was fake, for example, because it looked like Eggman hit literally nothing. And you'd be completely right about that. Eggman did hit completely nothing. But, you know, hitboxes. They are weird sometimes in Sonic games. This is a known fact.